Tears streamed down her face as she ran, her small legs trembling with every hurried step. Her voice broke as she sobbed, "She hit me. She hit me again." The words choked out of her, raw and trembling, as if the pain in her chest matched the ache in her bruised skin. Her tiny fists clenched tightly, clutching the torn fabric of her dress, as she collapsed onto the dusty ground at the feet of Jesus, gasping for breath between sobs. Her cheeks were streaked with tears, her face twisted in anguish. "Please," she begged through trembling lips. "Please tell him what she did." Her voice was barely a whisper now, lost amid her crying, pleading with a desperation that pierced through the silence. The ache of abandonment gnawed at her, the fear that no one would hear her, that she was utterly alone in this world of shadows and pain. She remembered the hunger, the gnawing emptiness in her belly that no amount of crying could fill. Her stomach growled fiercely, a reminder that she hadn't eaten in days. Her ribs ached from the cold nights she had slept outside, clutching her ragged blanket, shivering beneath the indifferent stars. Each bruise on her tiny body was a testament to a life of neglect, her innocence battered by the cruelty of those who should have protected her. The punishment was relentless. Whips across her back, harsh words that cut deeper than any lash, and silence that screamed louder than any scream. Her stepmother's voice echoed in her mind, a harsh, commanding tone that left no room for mercy. "You're useless," she had sneered. "A burden you'll never be rid of." And then the strike. The sharp crack of a hand against her face, the sting of a slap across her cheek, leaving her stunned, disoriented, and humiliated. Her tiny frame shivered as she remembered the nights she had curled into herself, trembling in the darkness, praying silently to a God she barely knew, begging for rescue. She had begged her mother once, but her voice was silenced, her pleas ignored. Her world was a cage of fear, where love was replaced by punishment, and hope was swallowed by despair. Now, as she looked up at Jesus, a figure of compassion, of pure kindness, her tears intensified. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "She hurts me. She hurts me so much. I don't know what to do anymore." Her eyes searched his face desperately, as if he held the answer to her suffering, the key to her salvation. Every fiber of her being longed for someone to see her pain, to understand her brokenness. But as she sat trembling at his feet, something began to shift in the air. A quiet stillness descended upon the scene, as if the very universe paused to listen. A gentle warmth emanated from Jesus, radiating outward like the first rays of dawn piercing the darkness. His eyes, the windows to infinite compassion, looked down upon her with a tenderness that melted the coldest of hearts. In that moment, a whisper of something greater stirred, an awakening of hope, a promise that her tears would not be in vain. The pain in her voice, the suffering etched into her young face, all seemed to converge into a silent plea for justice, for healing, for mercy. And Jesus, with a calm strength that defied the cruelty surrounding her, prepared to do something extraordinary. Her story was just beginning, for in the face of suffering, in the depths of despair, something divine was about to unfold, a miracle that would change everything. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what was to come next. And she, a broken child crying out in the darkness, was about to witness a love so powerful it could heal even the deepest wounds. For days, she had been hiding in the shadows of the small, dimly lit room, trembling with fear and exhaustion. Her tiny body bore the marks of neglect, bruises hidden beneath her torn dress, her eyes hollow from tears and sleepless nights. She was just a child, barely 6 years old. Yet she carried the weight of a world that seemed determined to crush her. Her parents had long abandoned her, lost in their own struggles and indifference. Her mother, a cold and distant woman, cared little for her pain, more focused on her own worries and fleeting pleasures. She had no one to turn to, no safe place to seek comfort, only the brutal reality that her world was a place of neglect and injustice. Her stepfather, a man often absent or too preoccupied with his own affairs, had once promised to love and protect her, but those words had faded into silence. Instead, it was her stepmother who ruled with an iron fist, quick to punish, slow to forgive. Her stepmother's voice was harsh and unforgiving, barking orders and accusations that she couldn't understand. If she made a mistake, if she accidentally spilled water, or forgot to clean her little corner of the house, she would be met with anger, slammed against the wall, or slapped across the face. The sting of her stepmother's hand was a constant reminder that she was unwanted, a burden too heavy to carry. One evening, after a long day of being ignored and scolded, she was left hungry and cold, her tiny stomach aching from starvation. She had tried to find a crumb or a dropped piece of bread, but her stepmother had scolded her harshly, calling her lazy and worthless. Her cries went unheard. Her pleas for food were ignored. She had no one to protect her, no one to listen. Her little heart felt abandoned and broken, as if the world had forgotten she existed. That night, her stepmother's anger boiled over once more. Perhaps she had spilled water again or failed to do a chore fast enough. She couldn't remember exactly. All she knew was that her stepmother's face twisted with fury, and she was suddenly struck. A harsh slap across her cheek that sent her stumbling backward. Her head spun, tears blurring her vision, pain radiating through her tiny body. She fell to the ground, clutching her face, trembling with fear and shock. Her voice caught in her throat as she whimpered and curled into herself, desperately wishing she could disappear. The child's world had become a nightmare of injustice, where love and safety had been replaced by cruelty and neglect. She had cried herself to sleep many nights, her small body trembling under the weight of loneliness. Her innocence was being chipped away by harsh words, slaps, and the cold silence that enveloped her. She longed for someone to see her pain, to understand her suffering, but she felt invisible, forgotten by everyone who was supposed to care for her. Despite all this, somehow, she had heard of Jesus, of his kindness, compassion, and the love he showed to those who were hurting. Perhaps it was a whisper from her weary soul, or a faint hope that someday, someone would rescue her from this darkness. And so, with trembling legs and a pounding heart, she had mustered all her courage to run through the alleyways and past the shadows and find Jesus. Her small voice, choked with tears, had finally broken through the silence as she reached his side, crying out her pain. "My stepmother hit me. She hit me again." Her plea was raw and desperate, a cry for justice in a world that seemed to have forgotten her. Her tears continued to fall as she looked up at him, hope flickering in her eyes amid the pain. She was just a girl, broken and battered, seeking mercy, seeking love, something she had been denied for so long. And now, as she sat there at his feet, trembling from the cold, trembling from her wounds, she knew deep inside that something greater was about to happen. Her story was about to change, because in that moment, amidst her tears and despair, she had found a love so powerful that it could heal even the deepest wounds. She ran through the dark alley, her small legs trembling with every desperate step. Tears blurred her vision, but she pushed forward, driven by a cry for help that refused to be silenced. Her tiny voice, cracked and trembling, echoed in the cold night air. "My stepmother hit me. She hit me again." Her face was streaked with tears, her cheeks raw from crying, her breath ragged from fear and exhaustion. She was just a child, barely 6 years old, and yet her life had become a series of relentless assaults, each worse than the last. Earlier that day, she had been thrown out of the house in her threadbare dress, her small frame stumbling into the open street. Her stepmother's words had been cruel, calling her useless, dirty, a burden she wished to cast away. Without warning, her stepmother had grabbed her by the arm, yanking her outside as if she were nothing more than trash. The girl had begged to stay, tears streaming down her face, but her cries were met with a harsh slap across her cheek. The sting of the slap burned, and she had fallen to the ground, clutching her face in pain, her innocence shattered further. Later, after wandering the streets, cold and hungry, she found a tiny corner to hide in. She had hoped for a moment of peace, but her peace was short-lived. Her stepmother found her there, furious that she hadn't come home. Without hesitation, she had struck her again, this time harder, sending her sprawling onto the cold ground. Her tiny body trembled as she curled into a ball, tears spilling from her eyes. The pain was not only physical but emotional, an overwhelming feeling of rejection and abandonment. She was hungry, starving for food, yet her stepmother refused her even a scrap of bread. "You're worthless," her stepmother sneered. "You don't deserve to eat." The insults kept coming, each word sharper than the last. "Stupid girl, useless burden, you'll never amount to anything." The girl's small ears absorbed every harsh word, each one stabbing her like a dagger. Her stomach growled loudly, but her stepmother ignored her, turning away as if she were invisible. The girl's hope was fading, replaced by deepening despair. She had no one to defend her, no safe place to hide. Then the worst came. Her stepmother, now furious beyond reason, had grabbed a thick stick. Her voice was a roar of rage as she struck the girl across the shoulders. The pain was unbearable, a fiery shock that made her cry out in agony. Her tiny body was pushed to the ground once more, her face streaked with tears and dirt. As she tried to crawl away, her stepmother kicked her, sending her sprawling onto her side. She begged her to stop, her voice trembling, but her pleas were ignored. Her tears kept falling, mixing with the dirt and sweat on her face. In that moment, she felt utterly trapped, a prisoner of her own suffering. Her world had become a nightmare she couldn't escape. Her innocence was being stripped away, piece by piece, each assault worse than the last. Her stepmother's hatred, her stepfather's silence, her mother's indifference, all combined to make her feel invisible and unloved. She was a victim, crushed under the weight of cruelty, with no hope in sight. And yet, somehow, amid the chaos and pain, she had heard whispers of Jesus, of his kindness, his compassion for the broken and the suffering. Her little heart clung to that hope, and with trembling legs, she had run, through the shadows, through her tears, through her fears, to find him. Her voice, barely more than a whisper, broke through the night air as she finally reached his side. "My stepmother hit me. She hit me again." Her voice was filled with despair, her tears flowing freely as she looked up at him, her eyes pleading for mercy. She was just a girl, battered and broken. Yet in her tiny voice, she carried a desperate hope that someone, anyone, would see her pain and do something. And now, as she sat trembling at his feet, her heart pounding with fear and longing, she sensed that something greater was about to happen. In her suffering, she had found a love so profound that it could heal even the deepest wounds. Her story was about to change, because in that moment, amidst her tears and despair, she was about to witness a miracle, a love powerful enough to break every chain of injustice and cruelty. She collapsed onto the cold, unforgiving ground, her trembling body curling into itself as if trying to disappear into the darkness that surrounded her. Tears flooded her face, streaming down her cheeks in relentless waves, her sobs muffled by the dirt and tears that blurred her vision. Her small hands clutched her chest, where the pain from her injuries felt like fire tearing through her fragile body. Her breath came in shallow gasps, each inhale trembling with exhaustion and despair. She was utterly broken, her strength drained by the relentless waves of suffering that had overtaken her life. The night air was bitterly cold, and her thin dress offered no protection against the chill that seeped into her bones. She shivered uncontrollably, her teeth chattering, her tiny frame trembling as if the cold was trying to claim her, too. Her stomach ached fiercely, starvation gnawed at her insides. Yet there was no food, no comfort, only the ache of hunger and emptiness. Her stomach growled loudly, a cruel reminder that her body was too weak to resist. She had cried out for help many times before, but no one had come. Her voice was hoarse from pleading, her cries swallowed by the vast silence of the deserted street. Now, exhausted and overwhelmed, she let her head fall to the cold ground, her vision swimming. Her limbs felt like lead. Her small body was trembling so violently she thought she might faint. Her mind raced with the pain, both physical and emotional, that had built up over days, weeks, perhaps even longer. How could anyone see her suffering and do nothing? How could the world be so indifferent? Her heart felt heavy with a despair so deep it threatened to swallow her whole. She looked up into the dark sky, her eyes filled with hopelessness, wondering if she would ever find relief. Her tears kept falling, soaking into the dirt beneath her, blending with the grime on her face. She was a child, so young, so helpless, and yet she was battered, bruised, and abandoned. Her tiny fists clenched tightly, her nails digging into her palms as she fought to stay awake, to stay alive. Every breath was a struggle, every heartbeat a reminder of her vulnerability, of how much she had already endured. The pain was pain that no child should bear, beaten, insulted, denied even the basic kindness of a warm meal or a gentle word. Her eyes fluttered, and for a moment, she thought she might faint. Her body weakened beyond measure, her spirit almost broken. She felt as if she had fallen into an abyss from which there was no escape, no salvation. The loneliness was deafening, a relentless echo that reverberated through her tiny soul. No parent to hold her, no one to wipe away her tears, no voice to tell her she was loved. Only silence and shadows, and the unending ache of injustice. Her body shivered uncontrollably, her teeth chattering so loudly that she feared someone nearby might hear her and come to help, but no one did. The street was empty, deserted by the world, abandoned by hope. She was a victim, battered and broken, awaiting the end of her torment, wondering if this suffering would ever cease. Her vision blurred again as exhaustion took over, and her eyelids fluttered closed. She wanted to cry out one last time, but her voice failed her. Her small frame grew colder and weaker, her consciousness flickering like a fragile flame about to be snuffed out. She lay there, vulnerable and exposed, in the midst of her pain, feeling as if her tears and cries had been swallowed by the darkness. Her suffering had reached its peak, an unbearable, crushing weight that seemed impossible to bear any longer. Every part of her ached, her body, her soul, her hope for rescue. And yet, amid that overwhelming despair, a faint glimmer of something different lingered, an unspoken longing for salvation, for mercy, for love. Just as her strength was giving out, and she felt herself slipping into unconsciousness, the air around her seemed to shift. A gentle presence, warm and tender, was approaching, someone who would not turn away from her pain. But for now, she was lost in her suffering, waiting for the moment when everything might change. She lay on the cold, uneven ground, her tiny body trembling from the cold and exhaustion. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment, tears still streaming down her face, and she stared blankly at the darkened sky above her. Her trembling hands clutched her chest, where pain still burned from the latest beating, the bruises and cuts a testament to her suffering. Her breath was shallow, each inhale shallow and ragged, as if her body was struggling just to keep going. The night was silent save for her quiet sobs and the faint rustling of the wind. Her tears continued to fall, silent and heavy, each drop a small echo of her heartbreak. She had no strength left to cry out, no energy to scream or plead. Only the overwhelming weight of despair pressed down on her, suffocating her hope. Her tiny fists clenched the dirt beneath her, nails digging into the earth as if grasping for some ounce of strength or rescue that might never come. Her eyes stared blankly at the starless sky, searching in vain for a sign of mercy, a whisper of salvation. She whispered a barely audible prayer, her voice trembling as she spoke into the darkness. Her words were soft, almost indistinguishable, just a whisper of hope amid the silence. "Please, help me," she murmured, her voice barely more than a breath. "Please, save me." Her lips trembled, and her small body shuddered uncontrollably. She closed her eyes for a moment, her tears still falling, and clenched her fists tighter. She was surrendering, completely giving in to the pain, the helplessness, the exhaustion that had overtaken her. Her heart was heavy with despair, her spirit crushed beneath the weight of injustice and neglect. She felt as if her little life was slipping away, lost in the darkness that stretched endlessly around her. Her trembling hands fell limp by her sides, her body relaxing just slightly as she surrendered to the silence. She stared upward, the tears now drying on her cheeks, and whispered her prayer again, soft, pleading, desperate. Her voice was almost inaudible now, lost in the vast emptiness. Every fiber of her tiny being longed for relief, for someone to notice her suffering and come to her rescue. Yet the world seemed indifferent, silent, and unfeeling. The cold night wrapped around her like a shroud, and she felt herself slipping further into unconsciousness, her eyelids fluttering closed as her breath slowed. Her heart beat faintly, almost inaudibly, as if preparing to stop altogether. The pain, the hunger, the tears, they all seemed to fade into a distant hum as she surrendered to the darkness. It felt as if everything was about to end. Her tiny life, her suffering, her hope, all swallowed up by the silence. And yet, in that moment of silent surrender, a stillness settled over her that was almost sacred. A pause so heavy, so dramatic, that the entire universe seemed to hold its breath. The night stretched on, waiting, as if the very fabric of time was suspended. The girl's trembling figure lay there, motionless now, her breathing shallow. Her eyelids fluttered shut, and her small hands relaxed. Her silent prayer hung in the air, unanswered by any earthly voice, but her spirit reaching out beyond the darkness, hoping, longing for something more. The moment felt infinite, like the calm before a storm, the pause before a miracle. Everything seemed to stand still, as if the world was waiting for a sign, a miracle about to break through the darkness. The silence grew heavy, thick with anticipation. This was the point where everything could change, where hope could ignite anew or be forever lost. And just as the darkness threatened to swallow her whole, a gentle presence was about to intervene. Everything was about to shift, and the universe, in that suspended moment, silently waited for the unexpected. In the stillness of the night, as the girl lay there trembling and exhausted, surrendering to the darkness that threatened to swallow her whole, something extraordinary was about to happen. No one saw it coming, not the girl, lost in her despair, nor those who might have been nearby, unaware of the silent prayer she had whispered into the vast emptiness. But just when hope seemed almost forgotten, when the night's darkness was thickest and the silence most profound, a gentle presence entered the scene. Suddenly, a warm glow seemed to fill the air, a light so pure and calming that it seemed to pierce through every shadow. The atmosphere transformed in an instant. The darkness that had cloaked her was replaced by a peaceful radiance, a divine presence that brought a profound sense of comfort and hope. It was as if the very heavens had opened, and from within that luminous glow, Jesus arrived, at the exact moment when no one expected him, when all seemed lost and the night was deepest. His footsteps were gentle, almost silent, yet their impact was undeniable. As he approached the girl, her trembling body seemed to still, her shallow breaths slowing as a wave of peace washed over her. His eyes, full of compassion and understanding, looked down at her with tenderness that melted away every ounce of fear and pain. In that instant, everything changed. Jesus knelt beside her, his presence radiating a love so profound that it felt like a warm embrace wrapping around her broken spirit. His voice, soft and soothing, broke through the silence. "Child," he said gently, "do not be afraid. I am here." His words carried the weight of eternity. an unspoken promise that she was seen, heard, and loved beyond measure. The girl's tear-streaked face lifted slightly as she looked into his eyes. In that gaze, she saw not only kindness but also the depth of divine mercy. Her trembling hands reached out instinctively, and Jesus took them gently, holding her small, fragile hands in his own. It was a simple act, yet it carried the power to heal even the deepest wounds of the heart. As he sat beside her, Jesus' presence seemed to ripple through the air, filling every corner with peace. His touch was comforting, his voice a balm to her hurting soul. "My child," he whispered, "you are not alone. No matter what has happened, I am here to bring you hope. Your pain is not the end. It is only the beginning of new life, of healing and restoration." In that divine moment, the girl felt something she had never known before, a deep, unshakable peace. Her tears slowed, replaced by a gentle calm that she could feel in her spirit. The pain from the beatings, the fear that had haunted her nights, all of it was being replaced by a presence of pure love. Jesus' arrival was not just a miracle of timing. It was a divine intervention, a reminder that even in the darkest hours, hope is never truly lost. The audience watching this scene, whether in the mind's eye or in the story's unfolding, would feel an overwhelming sense of relief and deep emotion. For a moment, all the suffering, all the tears, all the despair seemed to evaporate in the light of his love. The pain that once consumed her was now replaced by an unshakable hope. Her small face, once full of fear, now reflected a fragile but burgeoning trust, a glimpse of the healing power of divine mercy. Jesus' presence was like a balm to a wounded world. His arrival proved that no suffering is too great, no darkness too deep, for his love to penetrate. His compassion was tangible, his mercy infinite. And in that sacred encounter, the girl found not only relief but a new beginning, a promise that her pain would give way to healing, her tears to joy, her fear to peace. This turning point marked a divine intervention, an answer to the suffering that had seemed endless. Jesus, in his perfect timing, had arrived to restore hope, to bring light into the darkness, and to remind her, and all who witnessed, of the limitless power of divine love. In that moment, everything changed. Her heart, once broken and trembling, was now filled with the assurance that she was loved beyond measure, that her suffering was not in vain, and that hope, genuine and enduring, was alive within her. As Jesus' presence filled the silent night, everything around her seemed to shift. The girl, trembling still from the shock of her pain and fear, felt a sudden warmth rise within her, a flicker of hope igniting amid the darkness. Her tears slowed, and her trembling hands found a new steadiness, as if unseen hands were gently holding her, reassuring her that she was no longer alone. In that divine moment, a profound calm descended upon her spirit, and she felt the weight of her suffering begin to lift. Her eyes, once filled with despair, now shimmered with a fragile but undeniable glimmer of strength. She looked up at Jesus, her small face marked by tears but now also shining with a newfound courage. In his gaze, she saw not only mercy but also a promise, that her pain had not been in vain, that her cry for help was heard and answered. As Jesus gently rose from his kneeling position beside her, his presence seemed to ripple outward, touching everything and everyone nearby. The atmosphere grew heavy with the silent realization that something sacred had taken place, a divine intervention that could not be ignored. Nearby, the woman who had inflicted hurt and the others who might have been witnesses stood frozen. The stepmother's eyes widened in shock, her face draining of color as she stared at the man who had suddenly appeared, his calm, commanding presence impossible to ignore. Her hands, once clenched in anger, trembled as if she sensed her own guilt pressing against her conscience. The others, adults who had allowed or ignored the suffering, also looked on in stunned silence. Some looked away, ashamed, their faces flushing with embarrassment or remorse. The power of Jesus' arrival was undeniable, It silenced any voice of cruelty or indifference. In that moment, the truth became painfully clear. Cruelty and injustice could not stand before divine love and mercy. The girl, feeling protected and strengthened by his presence, sat up a little straighter. Her small shoulders, once hunched with fear, now carried a quiet resilience. She looked at Jesus with a trust that was deeper than words, a trust rooted in the knowledge that she was seen, heard, and defended by the one who held the universe in his hands. Her trembling was replaced by a steady breath, and a faint but genuine smile flickered on her lips, a sign that her suffering, no matter how intense, had not been meaningless. It was a testament to her resilience, and to the fact that her cry had reached the heights of heaven. Meanwhile, the adults who had caused or overlooked her pain felt the weight of that divine gaze. Some looked away, ashamed, their faces showing a mixture of guilt and humility. Others, perhaps, trembling with remorse, dared to meet Jesus's eyes full of compassion and authority. The silence grew thick with unspoken acknowledgement. Injustice had been exposed, and the truth could no longer be hidden. The shame of cruelty, the guilt of neglect, all fell like a heavy burden on those who had turned a blind eye. This moment proved that suffering was not in vain, because divine intervention had arrived precisely to bring justice, healing, and hope. The girl's heart swelled with a quiet strength, knowing she was no longer powerless. She felt the comforting assurance that Jesus's presence was more than just a fleeting moment of mercy. He was there to restore her, to protect her, and to bring authentic change. Her tears had been replaced by a newfound courage, rooted in the knowledge that she belonged to a love greater than any pain inflicted upon her. Her suffering had carved a path for divine intervention, a reminder that no cry for help goes unheard, and that even the smallest voice can echo through eternity. In that sacred, transformative instant, everyone present could see that something truly changed. The darkness of cruelty was pierced by a divine light, exposing the truth and illuminating the path toward healing. The consequences of Jesus's arrival were clear. The girl found strength to stand, comfort to heal her wounds, and a sense of protection she had never known before. The adults who had caused her pain, or who had ignored it, were left in silent shame, their hearts touched by the undeniable presence of divine mercy. And in that moment, the suffering was no longer wasted. It was the seed from which hope, justice, and love would grow, proof that when Jesus enters into our darkest hours, true transformation begins. As Jesus gently rose from his place beside her, a profound sense of peace began to settle over the girl. The trembling in her small body slowed, replaced by a calm she had never known before. Her tear-streaked face softened, and a quiet, fragile smile touched her lips. The warmth of his presence lingered in the air, like a comforting blanket wrapping around her fragile spirit, healing her wounds not just on the outside but deep within her heart. The pain that once seemed unbearable, the fear that had consumed her nights, these began to fade into a distant memory. Her eyes, now shining with a renewed hope, looked around and saw her surroundings in a different light. The dark night no longer felt so overwhelming. Instead, it was filled with a gentle glow from the divine presence that had arrived just in time. She was safe now, protected by the love of Jesus who had stepped into her suffering and turned it into a testimony of hope. Her small hands, once clenched in fear, relaxed into a peaceful rest. Her shoulders, once bowed with pain, lifted slightly as she drew in a deep breath, feeling the calm and reassurance that only divine love can bring. Her heart, once heavy with despair, now fluttered with a quiet trust, the kind that whispers, "I am not alone. I am loved." In that sacred moment, she knew that her suffering had not been in vain. It had opened a door to something greater, a divine intervention that restored her faith in goodness, in mercy, in hope. And as Jesus prepared to leave, his gentle voice resonated with a message that would echo in her soul forever. "Remember, little one," he said softly, Even in your darkest moments, love is never far away. My presence is always with those who seek hope and mercy. Never forget that you are precious, and that my love will never leave you." With those words, Jesus' figure began to fade into the shimmering light, leaving behind a trail of peace and renewed strength. The girl watched him go, her heart swelling with gratitude and a newfound sense of safety. Her fears had been replaced by a quiet confidence, knowing that divine love had entered her life and would remain with her, guiding her through every storm. She stood up slowly, feeling stronger, her steps lighter, her spirit restored. The pain and tears of the past still lingered faintly in her memory, but they no longer defined her. Instead, she carried with her a deep assurance that she was seen, loved, and protected. Her story now forever touched by the mercy of Jesus. The scene around her reflected this transformation. The night still stretched wide, but it was no longer an empty, frightening darkness. It was a space filled with hope, possibility, and divine presence. The consequences of Jesus' arrival were visible not just in her peaceful expression but also in the quiet strength she now carried. She was no longer a victim of violence or fear. She was a survivor, a child of love and hope. Her restored peace was a testament to the power of divine mercy to transform even the deepest wounds into sources of strength. And as she looked toward the sky, her heart open to the future, she carried the message Jesus had left her, one of love and hope that could sustain her through all her days. Now, I invite you to reflect. In your own life, do you recognize Jesus' presence in your darkest moments? Have you allowed his love to bring peace where there was fear? Remember, no matter how overwhelming the pain may seem, divine love is always near, ready to restore, to heal, and to remind you that you are never alone. When life feels most heavy and hope seems distant, ask yourself, am I open to seeing Jesus' light shining even in my darkest hours? Because sometimes, it's in those moments that his love becomes the greatest gift, an unchanging source of strength and renewal.